Good evening and welcome to the Jay Duke Show on Horse Network. Very excited to be here tonight. Margie Goldstein Engle is with me, and this is a show I've been waiting to do for several weeks now. As soon as she said she'd come on, I couldn't wait to get her on, and we finally were able to get our schedules to coordinate and make it happen. So tonight's going to be a really fun night speaking with Margie. She's got lots of great stories for us about her amazing career. I'm going to start off just thanking Farm Vet. They've been super sponsors for me for the past 2 months. They've been everywhere you need them to be at every horse show. They're always there. Use the Jay Duke Show discount to receive 10% off your code. They've got all the best products, everything you need to keep your horse happy and healthy and sound. Check out Farm Vet and check out farmvet.com. Also, marketing for equestrians. They're offering full service marketing for equestrian professionals and products. Proud to be a sponsor of the Jay Duke Show. Visit our website at marketingforequestrians.com. It's very important right now to be working together, seeking help on how to move our businesses forward through this difficult time that many of the professionals are facing. So check out, give Brenda a call at Marketing for Equestrians. I think you'll be really happy with the results, and she'll help you move forward through 2020 and into 2021. So I'm going to bring on our guest tonight. Margie Engel is an absolute legend in the sport. And, you know, there's been times I've brought guests on and we've talked about their bios and the accomplishments they've done. And I'm like, you know, how am I going to get through this? But I don't think I've ever seen anybody with a record like this one. And I actually have to read it. There's no possible way I could remember all of the things that Margie's done in the ring. And these are truly just a few of the highlights she's done. So, 210 Grand Prix wins. That's got to be a typo, but I've looked it up and triple checked it. But 210 Grand Prix wins. I don't know how that's even possible. She's been AGA Rider of the Year 10 times. The only person to ever achieve that. She's been on 20 Nations Cup winning teams. She's two-time National Grand Prix League Rider of the Year. She's competed in 17 World Cup finals. She's a three-time medalist of the Pan American Games. She won a silver medal at the World Equestrian Games, a team silver there. She made it to number 6 in the FEI World Rankings. She had a top 10 finish at the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney. She has career earnings over $4 million. I'm sure it's much higher now. I think that was actually old information. And she's been inducted into the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. I thought I had done a couple things in riding, but I don't think I've even sat on a horse compared to what my guest tonight has done. Margie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It just kind of means I've been around a long time.
Yes, well, you've been successful for a long time, and absolutely, congratulations to you on such a wonderful career, and the fact you're still going strong. You're going to add, those numbers are not going to stay level. There's no question those numbers are just going to go up and up. So it's so great to have you on the Jay Duke Show on Horse Network. I want to thank Carly Sparks. She's behind the scenes tonight, making everything happen for us. And she's been such a great boost for me and a benefit to work with. And it's been a real pleasure. So thank you, Carly, for being there. So Margie, let's talk about your what you've done in your career, and specifically like when you started out, and I know you started out, working hard and as a working student and stuff, but did you set goals for yourself when you were a young rider? And if you did, were they anything like where you're sitting today as far as what you thought could happen?
I don't know if I set particular goals. I always knew I wanted to ride. That was my first goal, just being able to get on a horse, because my parents were a little skeptical. They were worried about me getting hurt because of my size and because I was always a bit of a daredevil. And I played sports with the boys around the neighborhood, and I took chances probably I shouldn't have. So that was my first goal, was just to be able to convince them to be able to ride. And then it was difficult. I had to work around the barn doing the dog kennels because I was too young to take care of the horses. So at the beginning, it was just being able to ride and jump, and that was my main goal starting off. And as time went on, it was just to progressively try and get better and ride. I just loved everything about it. I love working with the horses. I broke a lot of the ponies and horses that were sent to the farm because of my size, and I didn't mind falling. So they would put me on the young horses, and I loved working with the babies. I mean, we used to even drive some of the ponies in a pony cart before we were able to put the weight on their back. So they all knew how to steer and were kind of voice trained. But I don't think I set goals till probably a little bit later in life.
Right. And for the viewers watching who haven't met Margie, she's mentioning her size. Margie's measures, well, in the book it says 5'1". That may or may not be generous on those numbers.
It's probably a little bit generous.
A little bit generous.
It's what it says on my driver's license.
That's right. So we'll go with that. But how, speaking as a rider, who is not taller in stature. I mean, many of the riders compete against are 6'6" riders from Europe. Many of the men are very, very tall. How you've developed a very unique style, and how does that go? It's not your traditional, say, American forward system of equitation style that would win you the Maclay finals today. But you've developed a style that worked very, very well for your physique and for your how you approach the ring, how you approach those jumps. All of those things have also made you a fan favorite, and everyone comes to watch and cheer for you. But how did you come up with the Margie Goldstein style?
I don't know if I'd call it style. I did do the equitation when I was a junior. I had people, they had me to sell horses. I did some of the horses in the equitation to help get them sold. Or actually, I was once fortunate enough, Phil DeVita let me a very nice horse to do our finals on, our medal finals, and I was able to do well with a horse named Carnaby Street that he was very nice to allow me to use. But you watch the different top riders, and then you pick up different traits from each one, and then you develop what works for you. I was always taught where there's a will, there's a way. And because of my size, they mainly were trying to get me into race riding. I had a lot of people that were trainers at the racetrack that wanted me, and I did gallop horses for a bit, but the Kramers who I rode for didn't want me to go to the racetrack because it wasn't the most ideal situation for a young girl when I was riding. So he let me gallop the horses when I was at the farm, but I never went to the racetrack. And to be honest, I got kind of bored just running around in circles. So, and I always liked jumping, but you learn to use what you can, and being small, you have to learn to use leverage a little bit differently than a taller person would. You have to learn to use your seat more and get the horses broke nicer. So I learned to do a lot of dressage and working so the horses were more responsive to my aids as far as going forward easily and coming back forward, just, back nicely. And that's all just through a lot of flat work and training with them. And that's something that we did a lot of groundwork with the horses and a lot of the basics. And I truly believe, I don't care how big you are, if the horses don't want to perform for you, they don't have to. They're a lot bigger, stronger than any of the riders are. So you have to kind of want them to do what you want them to do. You have to kind of work with them. So I had to learn to get into their heads, and I did a lot of catch riding when I was younger, from everything from ponies. When I was still a junior, I'd switch from my paddock boots and jodhpurs into tall boots to ride these huge things that over 17 hands, and I rode them all at the same time when I was a junior. But anything they'd ask me to ride, my parents used to laugh and say, if they asked you to ride a donkey, I think you would do it. But I just loved the riding. And you just learn to develop what works best for each horse. Some horses, I rode a lot of thoroughbreds. So when I started, I did have a much more forward seat than I do now. And especially because I did a lot of hunters and I did do the equitation. So those you learn to try and be soft on, and you do ride in a different seat. And then when we started bringing over the warm bloods, they needed a totally different ride. And then I tried to study a lot how the Europeans rode. So I kind of compromised and came up, my system is a little bit more of a combination of both the American forward seat and the European seat.
Yeah, it is a bit of a hybrid system, there's no question.
And it's always evolving. It's, as the horses change, you have to change with them.
That's very good advice. You do need to adapt to your horse as a rider. That is really key. I'll be, often when I'm teaching clinics, and there'll be a rider who's not so tall, and they'll say something, oh, my legs are too short or whatever was it. And I just bring up your name, and they immediately stop talking because they know that they've got no excuses whatsoever, because of course everybody's seen you. What would you say, all of those things that you have accomplished with your riding career, what stands out? What one moment to you, and I know and put you on the spot here, what one moment really stands out is like, that's a great memory for you in the show ring?
Oh gosh, I've been fortunate to have so many great memories. I can't think of one in particular. I mean, I think when the Kramers first asked me to start riding for them, I was ecstatic. I mean, they were like second parents to me. They were lovely people and they were great. The whole farm was like a big family. And when I was able to start, I would ride as many horses and ponies as I could, and that stands out as a big moment for me in my career because that's all I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess maybe when I had Daydream and my father helped me put a syndicate together because everything I rode was always for sale. And when I had Daydream, it was a lot of people were trying to buy them, and my father helped me put a limited partnership together and a prospectus. He took me to a lawyer so we could put the whole thing together, and I was able to. I put everything I had into it and probably bought maybe 1 foot of his and some other people together, and that was the first horse I was able to keep and do the Grand Prix with. And he was only 5 years old at the time, but for me, he was one of the nicest horses I had ridden. And I think winning my first big Grand Prix on him in Cincinnati was one of the big highlights of my life. When I remember being kind of a nobody, and I was the only girl in the jump off, and Cincinnati was in a football stadium. It was as close, it's very similar to the American Invitational. And I was just excited to be showing in the football stadium. And when he won, I was the only girl in the jump off and kind of the youngest one in. It was very exciting for me. But there's been a lot of good, nice moments. I mean, I've been fortunate to have so many nice horses. First year I went over to Europe and showing Hidden Creek's Laurel. She was a class act. I mean, just a princess. She was very much like a thoroughbred. She was a Dutch horse, but she was one you could ride with a very light seat and light hand, very responsive. And she wasn't huge like everyone thinks that I look for these huge horses. She was normal size and built more like a thoroughbred. And I think she was 7 when she was in Rome. That was our first show. She was clean every round she did. And she was double clean in the Nations Cup and clean in the first practice class. And then the Grand Prix at the time, you had to do 2 rounds and then a jump off. And she won the Grand Prix. And that was the first time that I was ever able to go over to Europe to compete. I had competed a lot in the States, but that was the first time I went with the team over there. So that was really exciting for me also.
Yeah.
And of course, always there's the regular things that people talk, going to the Olympics. That's for sure. And going to Sydney, I would have never gone to Sydney, to Australia, which was a fantastic city, without getting to go with the team. And we spent over a month there, and we had a lot of camaraderie with the different team. It was an all-girl team, and we all stayed there a long time, and we got to go see some of the other sports, which was nice, and everyone got along really well. It was just really a nice time.
Yeah, you were there in Sydney with Laura Kraut, Lauren Houff, Nona Garson. Nona Garson, I was a guest on my show once. She was fantastic. And Laura Kraut's an upcoming guest in 2 weeks. Everyone tune in for that. The great stories there. Is there a Sydney story that stands out with the 4 ladies that that stood out as far as an event you went, or did you stay in the Olympic Village there?
No, we did spend, I think, maybe 1 or 2 nights there, and it was amazing. And we stayed in a hotel though, and there were a lot of different events that happened. There was a story going around that with all the kangaroos and everything out there, they said that people end up hitting them in the cars all the time. And I don't know if this story was true or not, but one of the Dutch riders said that they hit one and usually they stun them and they still jump off. And they put their credentials on it and their orange jacket and everything, and they were going to take pictures. And then they said the kangaroo went jumping, it came back to life when they couldn't get their credentials back. That was the story anyway. But I don't know if that was true or not. But we got to see we saw some big snakes and went to a lot of different events. We went to go see the diving and some of the swimming events together. We had a lot of fun dinners together. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of things that went on. We all had a good time. Good. I can't think of anything in particular. I mean,
the camaraderie of an Olympics is like nothing else. Of athletes from all over the world coming together. It's just the most special thing. And
It was amazing.
I certainly hope they get to do that next year in 2021 in Tokyo. I hope that you are on that team. I know you definitely have a shot at it, and well, everyone will for sure be cheering you. I want to talk about when you set at the time a world record high jump, and that height was 7'8¾", or 2.36 meters. Those are amazing numbers to think about. Did you walk up to the wall after you jumped it?
No, actually for the photo, but I don't know. I had daydream and I didn't know the difference, and I just felt like he could have jumped a house if I wanted. And I don't know that he actually broke the record because I think Anthony was holding it when I went, but he attempted it 2 different times, and the second time I did it, he was like within a quarter of an inch of clearing it, and he cleared it with his belly, and his hind end went so high. He just had the one little block. He kind of hit it with his stifle, and then he kicked up late. And if you watch, he just had one little of the roll top down. But I think he could have done it given the right circumstances and having the right ride. I think the crowd got him excited, and then by the time after you do it a few times, they get a little bit wound up. But he'd won over 10 puissance classes. He used to do it. I've done it on a lot of different horses, but he jumped it normal. Like most of the horses, when you land, you feel like you're coming down off of a big drop. But he jumped it in a normal style. And it was, I just felt like he could jump anything.
Can you describe for the viewers the strategy riding down to a puissance, riding down to a jump that's 7 foot plus? How, as far as the canter you have and the distance you're looking for, like what is the strategy to ride to a jump that size?
Well, I got a lot of help from different people because I had never done it before. When I was at Washington was the first time, and I was on the team, and I remember Frank Chapeau wanted us to he said, "Oh, your horse looks like you could jump a big wall," and he wanted to get team points for the team championships. They didn't just have the Nations Cup; they had a team championship. So he said, "Well, at least you could go a couple rounds with him," and he was doing it easily, and I just kept going. But I mean, the main thing what people had told me, and now I'm understanding it more. You want to make sure it's not so much speed, but you want lots of collection and lots of impulsion behind, because you don't need the horse to jump out so much across. It's not width, but you want them to have the spring loaded to jump up so they get plenty of height. So you try and keep them really collected with a lot of impulsion behind. And most horses were good at a deep distance, and some of the others I rode were better deep. Daydream actually liked a little bit more space. His front end was better a little bit further away from the jump, and he was so good behind. And this was before the hind boots. Everyone was using those. I wish I had him now when they're taken away again. But I didn't have to worry about his hind end, really. It was just making sure he had plenty of room with his front end. Mm-hmm. But I got a lot of help from different people that had ridden a lot of puissance. I mean, Barney Ward was there, and I watched him do a ton of them, and he was coming and giving me advice. And I remember when I tried to break the record, I had different people, Michelle Grubb and some other people came up and said, "Oh, the eventers put Vaseline on them in case they rub it, so they'll glide over these." And we're up there greasing them up to see. I was learning all kinds of things I never knew about. So, but it was a lot of fun, and I learned what he could jump as I was doing it, and I did it with a lot of other horses. Probably I shouldn't have, but I was fine with it till I remember Joe Farr just said to me, "Do you really think that's good for the horses?" And he showed me a picture one time of the horse landing, and then I felt kind of bad. But I never had one get hurt, I have to say, jumping the puissance. I mean, the pictures if you ever see a horse race when they're racing and they're going at full speed, they do get a lot of suspension in their pasterns. And on the landing side, it didn't look the most ideal, but I never had one that got hurt doing that.
Nice. So let's talk about, you're well known for your young horse development. You work with a dressage coach at home who works a lot on the flat work with the horses. And, talk a little bit about the program you have as far as developing your young horses and what your goals are with them, before they start jumping, say the meter 40, meter 50 jumps.
Well, now I have the luxury of taking a little more time than I used to. I used to get sent a lot of 4, 5, and 6 year olds, and I had one owner that used to tell me they were older than they were just so I would go in the Grand Prix because that was more where the prize money was. But the first thing, you have to get them confident in you and responsive to your aids, and get them going around courses, the smaller courses, and riding correctly so they don't get in trouble. And you want to build a bond with them a little bit. And most of the horses, like I said, when I was starting, I had a lot that I broke. So we developed a bond and they were very trusting. And I think as long as you don't show them what they can't do, then they believe in you and they will try pretty much anything. I had a lot of young horses that at the time when I was starting out, that's all that I really got was either people sent me young ones to make into horses for sale, or the ones that nobody else really wanted to ride was kind of what I got. But the young ones were really nice because I feel like you're starting with a piece of clay from scratch. So whatever you do, it's kind of, if they're making mistakes, it's more on you than on them because you're starting with a clean slate. So any bad habits they learn basically is the rider's fault, I find a lot of times.
No worries.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, and I think that most, I mean, top professionals would always prefer to mold those young horses. You know, if you get a horse at the top level already, to, you know, they've got their little idiosyncrasies and the challenges to them, and you know, you'll get the occasional great match where that can happen, but for the most part, the top pairings are all horses that, you know, they've worked together since maybe they were 7 or so. It doesn't mean they were from the time they were 3 or 4, but for the most part, you've got a few years of relationship there to develop that communication between horse and rider. So with the flat work and the dressage work, how is that, do you feel, how is that helping your program? Because I think that a lot of what I see is people not doing enough flat work with their horses, and the top people are, of course, but so many others are not. How is that helping your program?
Well, mainly, like I was saying before, just part of it being small and part of it just having nice rideability. The more responsive your horses are, the better placement you can put them at the jump, the better balance they have, the more options you have from different distances where they're comfortable from. And it just helps overall for jumping any height, really. Even I remember when I rode Hunter's catch, rode a lot of those for different people. And when I was riding for Patty Harnoy, her sister Phyllis did dressage. And I used to love it when I'd beg her to have her flat the horses, you know, before even the Hunters that I did. So I asked her, and because they would, even with the Hunters, it would make them ride nicer because their balance was nice and they were so much more responsive. And it was just a lot nicer to ride around. They gave you a better jump. I mean, I think that the dressage work is good for at all levels. I don't care if you're doing equitation, Hunters, or jumpers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is really a top priority for everyone to work on. And certainly all the top riders you talk to will say it's such a big part of the program. And I think I'd like to see more and more of that at the mid levels and the lower levels as well, as far as emphasizing that part of it. When I was reading up on you a little bit, I came across several stories about you overcoming injuries, and it sounded pretty remarkable. How can we talk a little bit about, you know, is it just a mindset, or do you just have a higher pain tolerance than anybody else? Or how is it that you've been able to overcome some of these major injuries and then be competing again right away?
I don't know, maybe I don't have much self-preservation, I think, is most of my injuries, you know, you try and learn from your mistakes. Most of them really could have been prevented if I had a little more self-preservation, and they were from maybe riding a horse I shouldn't have been riding, or going in footing or in the rain and grass where I shouldn't have been going, where other people had scratched. And most of them are things in hindsight that could have been prevented. But I guess I must have a higher pain tolerance, is what a lot of the doctors say. It's not normal, but I never thought I was normal. Normal is overrated, but I guess I just, once I'm on a horse, I can kind of tune everything else out. I'm able to focus, and that is one of the few times that things don't hurt as much. I think when I've broken bones, it's almost been easier than the mono is the only thing that's really gotten to me where when I had mono really bad, where I physically felt like I couldn't ride for a little bit when I had that. But I don't know, you just kind of tune it out. I mean, for a few, you're in the ring just for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And so for a couple minutes, you can kind of tune it out if you have different injuries.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can, it's just a mindset of, we've heard stories about, hockey players playing on a broken leg and, riders breaking their ankle and then the next day they're in the ring. And, so, I mean, it is a mindset. And I think you are so tough mentally and so determined that really nothing's going to stop you. There's no question about that.
Well, I think it kind of started from when I was a kid. My brothers, I wanted to play football with them, and they were afraid if they got hurt, if I got hurt, because one was 7 years older and the other one was 8.5 years older. So they thought that they were going to get in trouble from my parents if they let me play. And I couldn't, and they said, first time you get hurt, that's it. So I don't think I would ever, I could never complain. I played tackle football with them. Even when I was playing sports with them, I throwing the ball around, I had broken something and I said I was fine and I kept playing. But it was just something I kind of learned at an early age because I love sports and I wanted to be able to play. And I remember the first time when I rode, because my parents said you can ride until you get injured, and then they didn't want me to ride, and I was goofing around with someone else was letting me. We were riding double on her pony, and I pushed her too far. I was on the back and she landed on me, and I was hoping, I heard a noise, but I was hoping it wasn't broken, and I said I was fine. I still took my lesson later that afternoon because I only got one lesson a week, and I wanted to make sure I got my lesson. And I went for almost a week without. I told my parents it was fine, and I ended up almost having to do surgery. And then the doctor I got told my parents how horseback riding was so dangerous, and it was something that was just a silly fall that I did to myself. Basically, I started pushing her, teasing her that I was going to push her off, but which was silly because she was in the front of the horse and I was on behind. So when she fell, she landed on top of me. But it was my own fault, which normally that's how I got injured, doing silly things. Or so you just learn to tune it out. I mean, I was afraid to tell my parents that I was hurt because I was afraid they weren't going to let me ride anymore.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely.
So I think you just learn to deal with it.
I've got a two-part question for you. I want to talk about, get your opinion on what you feel is the current state of show jumping in the United States. And I'd like you to answer it first from where you think that the American team is because the American team obviously has a great success record and great history, but where you think the American team is standing up to the rest of the world, today. And then the second part of the question is going to be how you think as far as the young riders coming up and what you see there as far as what's happening in the United States. So let's start off with the international team, which is, loaded with stars, going into 2021, which hopefully is going to be a normal year for us competition wise. What are your thoughts as far as the strength of the United States?
I think we've got a really strong country as far as equestrian sport goes. We've got a lot of depth. There's a lot of top horse rider combinations. They've all proven to be competitive internationally. That's why I think we have so many people in the top ranking. And before, we didn't have so many FEI events, so it was very difficult to get in the top ranking for the world. But now we've had a lot of riders go to Europe and so forth, and we have had really good results. And a lot of people, a lot of different combinations winning and doing well over there. And Europe is the ones that everyone looks to compete against. And we've done well the past, I don't know how many years, in a lot of the Nations Cups, both over there and in championships. So I think that everything's looking good. But on any given day, it's anyone's game. And that's what's kind of nice about our industry, is it's how both of you are feeling at the same time, and it's trying to get the horses to peak at the right time with the rider, and that's the hardest part. Choosing not to overshow your horses, but to show them enough to keep them in form, and that's what's difficult. But I think overall we're pretty strong, and I think there's a lot of top combinations in our country.
And what are you about the sport as far as what you see as far as the juniors coming up, or the, kind of that range of the 15 to 25-year-olds in the country? Do you think that it's, in 10, 20 years that the team's going to be as strong as they are now, or stronger, weaker? What's your thoughts on how the country is developing their youth?
I mean, it's difficult to say. I personally would like to see more horsemanship in some of the young riders coming up. I think we've gotten a little bit away from that. They're very good riders. They're technically very correct. They have top horses. Their mounts are really good. They ride correctly. Their foundation is fantastic. And but I would like to see them spend more time learning about the horses from the ground up. Just more horsemanship, more learning about them back at the barn. That's the main thing that I see that some of the young riders are weak in, and not all of them. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
I'm generalizing, but now with everything, everyone's so busy with different things in their lives, and they're on social media all the time and this and that. But I just would like to see them spend more kind of quality time with the horses and enjoy them as an animal, and not think of them as an inanimate object.
And that's, would you say part of that is a product of being there is so many horse shows? So there are some top young riders that show, at least 3 weeks out of the month, and often more. And so, it is a matter of just coming to the barn and working or the horse shows. Sorry, you're not even spending time at the barn enough, or there isn't a lot of downtime, because many of these kids are riding multiple horses as well. So, do you think the part of the problem is there's just too much emphasis placed on competition and not enough?
Oh, absolutely. I've always felt that I think it's the only sport, our industry, that shows 12 months a year. I mean, every other sport, the individual they have some time period off. Our sport, there's not even a month where there aren't any competitions. And you have to plan your schedule where the horses have time off too, but you have to give them a chance to freshen up, and it's all about competition and not really learning the basics and different things that you could at home. And that was one of the nice things for me if there was a silver lining from COVID, it was that at least we got to spend quality time with the horses at home and spend time working with them on the flat, and with the riders spending more time. They got to do things with the horses they normally didn't. I have a lot of kids that just show up and get on them at the ring and don't do anything at the barn, and now they're learning to do more with the horses, and I think that's really important too. I mean,
yeah, and I agree. I think the same thing. It's been great. They've gotten so much training done in the past 4 months. And the way the horses, to watch them develop at home. And of course, I'm excited to take them to the show and see what we have. And can't wait for that to happen. But it is amazing what you can accomplish when you have extended time at home, and you can just get to work with the basics and with the flat work, and then see these 5, 6, 7-year-olds progress. That's great.
Well, the competitions are a great barometer to see where you are and where your horses are and what they're lacking and what you're lacking as far as the training. But then it's nice to be able to go home and work on those things that you need to, and whether it's different gymnastics or different rideability of the horse or different things with your own position, it's kind of nice to be able to go home and have time in between to work on things. And I think we kind of get overdone with going to too many horse shows. Yeah, it's just all about going to horse shows and not really learning to ride the horses and kind of think like the horses think and get into their heads a little bit.
You have mentioned many legendary names tonight. Did you have an idol growing up, and someone that you really watched, and that was that person that you hoped to be one day? Or was there one person or one or two people that stood out for you that was such a major influence on your career and made you who you are today?
I don't know if I could say there's one person. I have to say, I know it sounds corny, but my parents were probably my best role models, and they had nothing to do with riding, but just their work ethic and their values and morals and integrity. And sense of humor. They in any aspect of life, I just strive to be as close to like them as I could, as far as work ethic, and just help you be productive in anything you do. But as far as riders, I mean, there's so many different ones that I'd watch on the sidelines by the fence. And one of the ones that probably stands out the most to me when I was growing up was Rodney Jenkins. And he didn't particularly have an equitation background, but he was part of the horse. And he always, I remember watching him, he was never in the horse's way when they were jumping. The horses had all the freedom to use themselves. And you can even see with his style now, when you talk about different people's styles, you can see a picture of him a mile away. But he never interfered with the horse. And if you watch horses free jump, they normally jump, they very rarely knock a jump down when the rider's not up there interfering. But he was always letting the horse basically be themselves, and he would get out of their way when they were on top of the jumps. And the horses all seemed to love it. I remember watching him with idle dice jog up to a 5-foot vertical, just a single rail, and they just kind of go up at a sitting trot and pop over it like nothing. But and I watched him ride all the hunters and all these horses that were lined up, and I thought that was cool. But there are things you pick up from everyone. Michael Matz was a real stylish rider, and his horses always were turned out beautifully. Katie Pradant was fantastic. I watched them all. I used to hitch a ride and offer to groom for free just so I could watch them at the horse shows and go up and watch them at places like the Invitational. Ian Miller is probably one of the longest top riders I've seen, and his position has never changed. And he's evolved over time and changed with different horses too. I mean, he's amazing to work with his horses and train them. I just used to remember watching him train them through combinations, like when he had Big Ben, and he was a very large horse, so you have to teach him to be quick in the tight combinations because he's a different size than a smaller horse that's probably a little more agile. And he would be out there practicing, and everything was through practice. And you just learn something from each and every person. I mean, even to this day, this is not a sport where you ever stop learning. You're always learning, and you can learn from everybody and anybody. I mean, everyone has their different styles. Everyone has different ideas, and you kind of take a little bit from each one and make them your own and see what works. And the horses are the best teachers. They let you know what works and what doesn't. If you're doing things correctly, they usually respond in time. But if you don't, they let you know that too.
They sure do. And Ian, you actually sound a lot like Ian there when you're talking about how you never stop learning and with your horsemanship and that. And I was lucky enough to train with him for a couple of years and then later ride with him on the team. And he was never stopped learning. He'd always be watching. He'd be watching every horse. He'd be watching the riders. He'd be watching.
He's a student.
And he's a student of the game. And there's no question when it comes to success and switching sports. And another student of the game was a hockey player named Wayne Gretzky. And I mean, just those people like that are always learning. They're always learning.
They're hungry for knowledge, and if you're that passionate about any sport, you're going to learn more and you're going to be more into it. But I remember watching Ian one year. I think we were in Winnipeg, and he had this horse that I don't think most people could have ridden around a preliminary jumper class. And it went in the warm up, and I don't know how many. It must have had 4 or 5 jumps down. And I don't know how, but he picked this horse almost up and over. But he got this horse around and ended up winning the gold medal on one that probably 99% of us couldn't ride around a schooling jumper class or a low preliminary. But he was just amazing. I used to watch him do things with horses that I thought was incredible. Same with Joe Farges and Conrad and those people. I mean, there's so many. I know I'm leaving out names, but there's so many top riders out there, and you watch, and they are all students of the sport too. I mean, that's one thing they all have in common is that they want to learn, and they want to learn not just from other riders, but from the horses themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's in 10 years, 20 years from now, we're going to be talking to some riders, and they're going to be saying, well, I remember watching Margie Engle, and she said this and she did that. And because you are setting that example, and I think that is an important thing for the sport and for the future, and for those younger riders that are out there and they're watching and they're paying attention, they're going to learn a lot. And so, I know
what not to do.
A little Rodney Jenkins story actually was funny because obviously, as brilliant a rider as there's ever been. And but one thing he would do is sometimes he'd flap his elbows a little bit. And one time he said, well, I don't get it. I do a lot of things right on a horse. But I flap my elbows, which really isn't the very best thing to do on a horse. But then everybody wants to imitate what I can't do.
I think I'm guilty of that sometimes too. I think when things aren't working, you try and use every part of your body you can to help encourage them to give them that little extra. So it's just kind of human nature to Maybe if you're flapping, you help them fly over the jump. I don't know, but you use whatever parts you can.
No, absolutely. If there's one horse that you wish, and not one that you have ridden, but one horse that you wish you could have ridden, who is it?
I think my favorite all-time horse to watch jump, and it looked amazing with so many different riders, would have to be Gem Twist. I mean, he was like a cat. He would crouch down, and I remember I would get chills watching him jump. And he did things that I thought were physically impossible. I remember when Greg and he first started in Tampa one year, he could leave out 3 strides on a line, or he could run and chip. He did things that you thought there's no way he's going to make it over the jump, and he would somehow do it. And he won with 3 different riders. He was AGA Horse of the Year with Leslie, with Laura, and Greg. Also with the WEG, instead of where most horses get nervous and start jumping worse, he just jumped better and better with every rider. It was unbelievable. I don't think to this day I've ever seen one that cared as much about the jumps as he did and had a heart like he did. He just was kind of a freak of nature.
He really was, and you know that when it comes to the greatest horses of all time, you know that his record of having 3 different riders, no horse has ever done that. What he did. I did a poll one time on social media on who was the greatest ever, and I think he won, actually. I think Gem Twist did win that poll as the top horse.
It would be hard not to. I mean, because he wasn't just that he could jump big jumps. He was fast too. He could win Grand Prix. It wasn't like he was just a championship horse, which I say just, but I mean, you could run him flat out and he would still miss the jumps. I mean, he was amazing. He was kind of the jack of all trades. I mean, he could do everything. Yeah, there wasn't really anything. And to just watch him jump, he put so much into every single jump.
Yes.
I mean, he did everything he could do to miss him. He really was that expression, being allergic to the wood. That's what he looked like.
That's great. Well, I could talk to you all night about horses, but we have a question from one of our viewers, and we're going to put it up, and I appreciate you answering. From Kim Curtin. Is she as good as they say at poker? Kim, love Kim Curtin. She's absolutely fantastic. So how is your poker game, Margie? How is that?
I just enjoy it. I don't have the best poker face, but I have a good time. It's a great distraction. It's one kind of can goof around and talk with each other, and it's not usually much about horses. You get your mind off all the other things that's going on during the day, and just kind of have a good time. We all tell stories, and it's a fun game. It's a kind of a social game, and most of the people that play are friends from the horse show and so forth. And I've met a lot of neat people at the poker table, even in Vegas. I remember like a year ago, I met this guy that was an inspirational speaker. He was in the Boston Marathon or watching his friends, and he was one of the most fun people to ever be around, and he was just happy to be alive, and it was and I think if it just puts things in perspective, when we kind of complain about having 4 faults or a bad day here, he was a double amputee, and he was in the best mood. He went around and he learned, when you talk about have different things that you have to, different handicaps, he was double amputee, and he did competing in the marathons and that so forth. And then he started riding bikes with his arms, and that's how he competed. So he didn't let anything stop him. And he just had love of life. He just really enjoyed every minute. He was fun to play cards with. Everything, he was having a great time. But it's just his positivity, and it was kind of infectious. It was just really a lot of fun. And so when people play cards, it's just having a good time. We don't play high stakes games. I'm not necessarily the best one, but I have a good time.
There you go. Well, and that's the important thing. That's for sure. I will keep that in mind.
Tim can come play with us anytime. We had one of Tommy's wife or girlfriend came and played the other couple of weeks ago. She had never played before, and the last 4 games we played, she won every one. So I mean, it's not a hard game to learn.
No. Well, when Kim and I are allowed to cross the border, maybe we'll come visit you and we'll challenge you at a little poker.
Okay. No problem.
That sounds fun. Margie, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You are an inspiration. You're attitude, it shines through. When you're in the ring, you just have an aura about you and a determination about you, and it's amazing to watch. And that's why so many people love coming and watching. And so you are a true inspiration. I'm hoping there's lots of people out there tonight that are watching this show, and they're going to feel very inspired to get out to the barn tomorrow and work as hard as they can and spend some time with those wonderful animals that those horses are. So thank you so much for joining us, and definitely hope to have you back soon on the show. Best of luck with the rest of the year, and best of luck with being on the team in 2021.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I want to thank Farm Vet and Marketing for Equestrians for sponsoring this show. Again, check them out, farmvet.com. Use the Jay Duke Show discount, get 10% off your products. Keep those horses happy and sound. Farm Vet has all the products you need for them. Marketing for Equestrians, check them out. Get that business of yours going, revved up 2020, 2021. Brenda Mueller, she does a fantastic job. Thank you so much to everyone. As always, play safely and respect the horse. Good night.